Welcome back. In today's video, we are going to solve some equations by completing the square. And then in the next video, we'll use that skill to write standard equations of a circle. Okay, so before we complete the square, let's just practice factoring a trinomial like this. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to make 36 and that add up to make negative 12. And the two numbers that do that are negative 6 and negative 6. They multiply to positive 36 and they add up to negative 12. So that gives us x minus 6 times x minus 6. Now when we get these two binomials that are exactly the same, multiplying something by itself is the same as that one thing squared. So we can actually simplify this to x minus 6 squared. Okay, so this would be our final simplified factored form. Okay, now we are going to solve some equations by completing the square. So our first equation here, x squared plus 8x minus 5 equals 3. The first thing that we need to do is take this, what we'll call c. So we've got a is 1, b is 8, and c is negative 5. We're going to take this c and move it to the other side and make room for a new c. So we're going to have x squared plus 8x, and then I'm going to leave a blank for a new c, equals, and then we have 3 here already, and we're adding 5, so 3 plus 5 is 8. Okay, so to get that new c, and this step right here is what is actually completing the square. So we take b and divide it by 2 and square it. So b is 8 over 2 squared. Okay, so that is 4 squared, which is 16. So the new c is going to be 16. Now, if I'm adding something to the left side of an equation, I have to add it to the right side also. So I actually need a blank over here to match. So plus 16 on this side as well. Okay, so my next step is to factor. So I've already completed the square just by finding this 16 and putting it on both sides. Okay, and it's called completing the square because what I have here is a square trinomial. So when I factor this, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8, and those two numbers are 4 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to have x plus 4 times x plus 4, which is the same as x plus 4 squared. This is a square trinomial because when I factor it, I come to a binomial squared. Now on the right side, 8 plus 16, that's 24. Now, how do I get rid of this squared? I take a square root. Now, when I take a square root, I automatically get two answers, a positive and a negative answer. So plus or minus the square root of 24. Okay, so I have x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 24. Okay, now I can take this 4, this positive 4, and put it over here as a negative 4. When I move it to the other side, it changes sign. So I have x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 24. Now let's simplify the square root of 24. So 24 is the same as 4 times 6. So this right here is the same as the square root of 4 times 6. And the square root of 4 is 2. So it's the same as 2 times the square root of 6. So there is my final answer. Okay, my next one here, I've got y squared minus 12y minus 1 equals 2. I'm going to take this c and move it to the other side and make room for a new c. So I have y squared minus 12y and a blank for a new c equals 2 plus 1 is 3, and I'll put a matching blank. So what I put here, I will also put here. So we need to find that new c, so we take b and divide it by 2 and square it. So b over 2 squared, that's negative 6 squared, which is 36. So I have plus 36 on both sides. Okay, so now I factor this. What multiplies to 36 and adds to negative 12? Negative 6 and negative 6. So that's y minus 6 times y minus 6, or y minus 6 squared. And that equals 3 plus 36, which is 39. Now I'll tell you a little secret. Look here, b is 8. When I factor, I get half of that right here. B divided by 2, that number 4, always ends up right here. So this b divided by 2, which is 4, will end up right here. And the same happened right here. B divided by 2 was negative 6. Negative 12 divided by 2, negative 6. That goes right there. That works out every single time after we complete the square. So next I take a square root on both sides and I get y minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 39, which cannot be simplified. And I'll take this negative 6 and put it right over here, and it becomes a positive 6. Y equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 39. Okay, next up, x squared plus 16x minus 1 equals 3. I'm going to move this minus 1 to the other side to make room for a new c. X squared plus 16x and a blank for a new c equals 3 plus 1, which is 4, and a blank for that same new c. To get the new c, I do b divided by 2. 16 divided by 2 squared. So that's 8 squared, which is 64. So the new c is 64. Okay, now to factor it, I'm going to end up with a binomial squared. I know that because I just made a square trinomial. Half of 16 is 8. X plus 8 squared is my factored form. And 4 plus 64 is 68. Now the square root of both sides. So I get x plus 8 equals plus or minus the square root of 68. Now I think I can simplify 68. I think 4 goes into 68, and that's a square number. So 68 divided by 4 is 17. So the square root of 68 is the same as the square root of 4 times 17. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to simplify this to 2 times the square root of 17. And I'm also going to move this 8 over here, and it becomes a negative 8. X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 68, which is the same as the square root of 4 times 17, and the square root of 4 is 2. 2 times the square root of 17. And our last one here, y squared minus 121y equals 2. So there's no c here to move over, so I just need to make room for a new c. Y squared minus 121y, and then a blank, equals 2, and then a matching blank. Okay, so I have negative 121 divided by 2 squared, and that will get me my new c. Okay, so let's see here, negative 121 over 2 squared. 3,660.25. So plus 3660.25. Okay, now if I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 3660.25 and add up to negative 121, that is not going to be easy. But using the little secret that we learned here, half of b gives me what goes right here. I'll just take half of negative 121. So I know that's going to be a negative number. Okay, so let's see, negative 121 divided by 2 is negative 60.5. Okay, then on the right side, I just add these two together and I get 3,662.25. Okay, then square root of both sides. y minus 60.5 equals plus or minus the square root of 3662.25. Okay, then I'm going to move this negative 60.5 over here, and it's going to become positive. Y equals 60.5 plus or minus the square root of 3662.25.